Nurse, you think your badge protects you? Step back or I'll make you. Dr. Kane. Please, protocol. The emergency department at Seattle General trembled with sound, monitors beeping, vents sighing, rain drumming the windows like steady fingers. Grace Miller's grip tightened on the chart tablet as Dr. Leonard Kane bore down the hall, jaw locked, coat flaring behind him. It was today, 7:12 a.m., and the world felt 2 sizes too small. A patient's wife cried softly under the flickering exit sign. An orderly froze beside a mop bucket. Grace didn't move. The fluorescent lights buzzed above her, turning the polished floor into a pale river at her shoes. You're blocking my room, Dr. Kane said, every word clipped. Clinical. Move, Grace steadied her breath. We follow triage order. Room 3 is under isolation. Isolation is for people who know their place, he said, low. The nurse's station swallowed the comment. Keys stopped clattering. The rain seemed to lean in. Grace angled her chart. We have protocols, doctor. He stepped closer. Cologne and coffee. Don't teach me medicine. A portable EKG chirped like a nervous bird. Grace adjusted her lanyard, the plastic edge of her hospital ID badge cool against her thumb. That small click at the badge clasp, she'd always found it calming like a lighthouse metronome in stormy water. Kane's gaze dropped to the badge, then lifted to Grace's eyes. Something flickered there, annoyance, then a calculation she couldn't name. He reached for the door handle of room 3. Wait, Grace said. Gloves, mask, it's flagged. He tore a glove box from the wall with one hand. Not from you. The patient behind the glass coughed. Housekeeping paused halfway down the corridor. The clock hands crawled forward. Dr. Kane, Grace tried again. Charge nurse approval is. His palm cut the air. A flat, shocking sound. Not a punch, a slap. Her cheek went hot and then numb. Like the moment a cold pack first touches skin. The chart slid from her fingers, skidding under the gurney's wheel. The hallway exhaled in one collective gasp. Everyone back to work, he said, not looking at anyone else. His voice curled with authority, the kind you learn in polished lecture halls and never unlearn. If she can't follow orders, she can clock out. Grace tasted metal at the edge of her mouth but did not raise a hand to her face. She reached for the chart instead, fingertips brushing paper and grit. The floor's wax smelt faintly like lemon. An elderly volunteer stammered, Doctor, sir. Not a word, Norman. A resident in navy scrubs took a half-step toward Grace and thought better of it. The rain tapped faster now. The window dotted like a sheet of dotted notes. From the waiting area, a little girl asked her father if the hospital was supposed to be this loud. Grace stood. Her badge swung thumping softly against her chest. The photo on it, taken on her first day, caught the light. Behind the plexiglass door, the patient coughed again, thinner this time. We're still a hospital, Grace said, voice steady. We still have rules. Dr. Kane's eyes flashed. The only rule is speed. Move. He reached for the door. Grace placed her palm on the handle before his fingers closed. He froze. The tension felt like a wire stretched between them, humming. Don't, she said. Mask, gown. For one heartbeat, no one breathed. Then he slapped her hand away so hard the door jostled in its frame. Enough, he said. The badge on Grace's lanyard flipped, landing face down against her scrub top. Half hidden behind the laminate, a hairline crack in the plastic caught the light. She'd noticed it this morning. It traced the edge of a tiny embossed emblem no one else ever looked at. Down the corridor, a pair of heels clicked. Deliberate, approaching. A woman's silhouette appeared at the far end. Umbrella dripping, coat unbuttoned mid-stride. Heads turned. Norman the volunteer's mouth fell open. The resident swore under his breath, then remembered where he was and swallowed the word. Dr. Kane didn't look. Final warning, he murmured and pushed the door. Grace didn't step aside. He lifted his hand, impatient. The heels stopped. A calm voice filled the space, the kind that made chaos put down its pen and listen. Dr. Kane, explain what you're doing. He inhaled, straightened, and turned toward the voice with the easy posture of a man who expects the room to agree with him. His face changed. Grace saw it. Confusion. Then dawning recognition, as if a curtain had been lifted from a window he'd walked past for years. Rainwater pooled beneath the newcomer's umbrella. Her gaze slid from the trembling isolation light to Grace's flipped badge, to the red mark blooming on Grace's cheek. She didn't blink. Start over, she said. The vents sighed. The little girl in the waiting area went quiet. Somewhere, a printer spit out a single page and stopped. Enjoying this? Tap subscribe for tomorrow's story. The storm outside eased into a gray drizzle that streaked the hospital windows like tears on glass. The emergency department of Seattle General Hospital had seen its share of long nights. But this one left an ache that wouldn't wash away. Grace Miller, 32, stood at the sink, cold water trickling through trembling fingers. The faint sting on her cheek had dulled, but her reflection still showed the faint outline of the doctor's hand. She turned off the tap, folded a paper towel, and pressed it gently against the mark. Behind her, the automatic doors whooshed open and shut, bringing whiffs of rain and disinfectant. Nurses whispered in clusters, not daring to meet her eyes for long. The air carried a charge of guilt and silence. "Grace," came a soft voice. It was Evelyn Torres, the charge nurse, mid-50s, calm under fire, a woman who had survived 3 hospital mergers and 2 pandemics. Her silver badge caught the overhead light as she approached. "You should go home," Evelyn said. "Get some ice. I'll mark you off the board." Grace shook her head. "We're short 2 techs. I'll finish my shift. Sweetheart, your face—" "I'm fine," Grace said, voice steady. He hit a nurse on duty, Evelyn. "You and I both know HR won't believe it if I just leave." Evelyn exhaled through her nose, a small, tired sound. "Then document it. Every detail. Time, witnesses, everything. I will." Grace's eyes flicked toward the nurse's station, where the resident who'd frozen earlier now busied himself at a terminal. Pretending not to notice, Evelyn's gaze softened. "He's powerful, Grace. Doctors like him. They don't break easy." Grace looked down at her ID badge, cracked at the edge where the clip met plastic. "Neither do I." 2 hours earlier, before the confrontation, Grace had been charting vitals when the hospital overhead speakers chimed. "Code blue, room 3. The patient, an older man named Mr. Dawson, admitted for pneumonia, had taken a bad turn." Grace had rushed to prep the room, calling for Dr. Kane's team. She had followed protocol, isolating the patient for suspected contagion. That was before Kane decided he knew better. And now, after the chaos, he was back in his glass office upstairs, untouched by the tension he'd left behind. Grace gathered her notes, signed off her last chart, and headed toward the staff lounge. She wanted to sit for 1 minute, just one. The lounge was dim, the vending machine humming. Grace poured herself coffee, black, the way her late father had always made it. He used to say coffee and courage had the same bitterness. As she sipped, her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, her older brother. "You all right, kiddo? Heard about that Seattle rain?" Grace smiled faintly. He didn't know, couldn't know. He was stationed with the Air Guard in Spokane. She typed back, "Long day. Tell Mom I'll call tomorrow." She didn't hit send. Instead, she stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then slipped the phone into her pocket. Back in the main corridor, Evelyn spoke quietly to HR Officer Mike Hartley, a man whose tie was always crooked and whose concern always came with conditions. "Dr. Kane still in trauma?" he asked. "No," Evelyn said. "Upstairs." "He said he's dictating notes." Hartley sighed. "You know how this goes? We'll review the incident report. Let's not jump to conclusions." "Conclusions?" Evelyn's tone sharpened. "He slapped her, allegedly." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "You weren't here, Mike. Everyone saw it." "That's why we'll investigate properly," he said. "And I'd suggest telling Nurse Miller not to. Escalate things. Meaning? Meaning doctors bring in donors, grants, reputation. We need to manage this carefully." Evelyn's lips pressed tight. "So do nurses, Mike. We manage lives." Grace filled out her report meticulously. Date, April 14th, 2025. Time, 7:12 a.m. Incident, physical contact initiated by attending physician during patient care. Witnesses, Norman Lewis, volunteer, Dr. Chloe Ng, resident, several nursing staff. She printed it, signed it, and placed it in a manila envelope addressed to HR. Her hands shook only once when she wrote her name. By late morning, the halls returned to rhythm, phones ringing, stretchers rolling, monitors chirping their sterile melody, but Grace could still feel the echo of that slap in every sound. At 10:40 a.m., she passed the glass wall of Dr. Kane's office. He was inside dictating notes into a recorder, voice low and even. On the shelf behind him sat a silver plaque, Seattle General, Physician of the Year 2023. Grace walked on. In the waiting area, Norman, The elderly volunteer waved her over. "Nurse Miller," he whispered. "That woman from earlier, she's still here." Grace blinked. "What woman?" "The one who stopped the doctor." She turned toward the far end of the corridor. The same heels clicked faintly on tile. The woman was speaking with the hospital director, Harold Pierce, near the security desk. Tall, calm hair pinned in a neat twist. Her coat was draped over one arm. Grace recognized her face from somewhere but couldn't place it. Pierce nodded solemnly, gesturing toward the staff elevators. The woman's eyes followed him, but only for a moment. Then they landed on Grace. It was a soft, assessing look, neither pity nor surprise. Just recognition, like two pages meeting again in the same book. Grace's chest tightened. She gave a polite nod and turned away, pretending to check her pager. Norman leaned closer. "You know her?" "No," Grace said. "I don't think so." But her badge swung again as she moved, and that small, cracked corner caught the light once more, just like it had when the woman first arrived. Upstairs, Dr. Kane's office phone buzzed. He answered on the second ring. Leonard Kane. The voice on the line was cool, professional. "Dr. Kane, this is the executive suite. The director would like to see you now." He frowned. "Can it wait?" "I'm documenting patient charts." "No, doctor. He's waiting in conference room 3B. Kane hung up, irritation flashing behind his eyes. He straightened his tie, adjusted his white coat, and headed for the elevators. The walk felt longer than usual. People glanced at him but quickly looked away. Even the receptionist didn't offer her usual smile. He pressed the elevator button. As the doors closed, he caught a glimpse of Grace through the glass partition, her head bent over a patient chart. The red mark on her cheek was faint but visible. For the first time that morning, a thought crossed his mind. A small, uneasy flicker. Had he gone too far? The elevator doors shut, sealing the question inside. The conference room smelled faintly of dry erase marker and winter coats. Harold Pierce, Seattle General's director, stood with his hands folded, expression neutral. Beside him, the woman from the hallway waited, posture composed, rain still beating on her sleeves from the walk over. A closed binder rested at her elbow like a held breath. Dr. Leonard Kane entered with a physician's brisk efficiency and a politician's smile. "Harold," he said then to the woman, "I don't believe we've met." "We have business to address," Pierce said. "Please sit." Kane took the far chair, facing both of them as if flanked by opposing counsel. He rested a hand on his recorder, then thought better and set it aside. "An incident in the ED," Pierce said. "This morning." Kane glanced out the glass where rain drew diagonal lines through the skyline. "The staff were obstructing urgent care. I took control." "Did that control involve striking a nurse?" the woman asked, voice even. Kane blinked. "That allegation is false." Pierce's mouth tightened. "Witnesses say otherwise." "They're shaken," Kane said. "Stress distorts memory. I acted to secure isolation protocol." "By breaking it?" she asked, his jaw flexed. "Room 3 needed physician review. I would appreciate knowing who exactly is questioning my clinical judgment." The woman didn't answer that. "What did you say to Nurse Miller before you touched her?" Kane drew in a slow breath. "This is getting theatrical." Pierce's tone cooled. "Answer the question." "I told her to move," he said. She refused. "So you hit her," she said. I redirected her hand from the door. "Hard enough to leave a mark," Pierce said quietly. Kane held Pierce's gaze. "We can argue adjectives, Harold, but you've asked me for facts. Patient care was delayed and I moved a barrier out of the way." "That's the fact. Someone recorded it," the woman said. His pulse ticked. "Recorded what?" "The moment," she said. Kane's eyes sharpened. "Phones are not permitted in isolation zones." "Hallway," she said. "Just beyond the line." Silence sat down at the table like a fourth chair. Pierce opened the binder. A still image showed a blur of motion. The swing of a doctor's sleeve, a nurse's head half turned. The frame was rough, but the posture spoke. Kane looked away. "A single angle, no sound. It proves nothing." "Sound exists," she said. He swallowed, the movement small. "Then we'll review it together, today." Pierce closed the binder without looking at him. "We will, and a written statement from you complete by noon." Kane nodded once. "I'll send it." The woman's voice softened a shade. "You trained to save lives, doctor. You also trained to lead. Leadership can't bruise." Kane's jaw eased, if only to a different stiffness. He stood. If we are finished, I have patience. Pierce didn't dismiss him. You'll remain accessible. I may call you back. Kane's gaze flicked to the woman again, hunting a name that had not been offered. My line is open. He left with careful steps as if any sound would argue against him. When the door clicked shut, Pierce exhaled slowly, as if breath were a resource he must ration. You all right? He asked the woman. She nodded. He is very sure of his own story. Pierce rubbed his temple. He always is. Then the rest of us need to be sure of ours, she said. Downstairs, the ED had found its rhythm again, but the day felt redesigned. Nurses moved with the care of people carrying a fragile box. Grace checked a patient's IV drip, then scanned the whiteboard for discharges. The waiting room coffee machine hissed and stuttered. Grace, Evelyn said gently. HR got your report. They want you upstairs later, Grace nodded. I can go on break early. Evelyn's eyes roved over her cheek. Ice any chance you get, and write everything you remember that you didn't put in the form. I will, Grace said. Any word from Mr. Dawson's wife? She's calmer. Social work sat with her. Evelyn hesitated. You don't have to be brave the whole shift, you know. Grace smiled a little. Bravery is cheaper by the minute. Evelyn huffed a laugh despite herself. Stubborn. Learned from the best, Grace said. She moved to a curtained bay where a teenager sat, ankle in a wrap, mother rubbing his shoulder. I'll get you a set of crutches, Grace said, crisp but kind. You'll be limping like a pro. The mother's smile was grateful and tired. Thank you. Grace stepped away to supply, hands steady now that they were busy. Motion made meaning. At the station, Norman folded visitor stickers into little boats and lined them up on the counter's edge. Sailed 2 mergers, he told her, and 1 cafeteria menu change. We'll sail this too. Grace looked down at the tiny fleet. Then we should name 1 Courage. Done, he said, and nudged a sticker boat forward by a fingertip. In the elevator, Kane stared at the closed doors and counted floor lights like seconds. He forced his shoulders back and cleared his head the way he did before walking into OR, routine first, then finesse. He could be wrong without being guilty, he told himself. He could be human without being punished. When the doors opened to the main lobby, a group of visitors stepped in, all hushed but watching him. He managed a nod, no one returned. At a corner alcove, a staff member's tablet played silent, muted news. On screen, a headline scrolled past about a different hospital in a different city. Leadership, culture, accountability. The word lingered in Kane's mind as he walked. Accountability, plural and sharp. He tried on the shape of an apology in his mouth. It felt like an instrument he hadn't played since residency. By noon, Grace stood outside the HR office, palms pressed to her scrub pockets to keep them from fidgeting. The corridor here was carpeted, the hum of the building softer, as if problems upstairs were less urgent, more soluble. Mike Hartley opened his door with that practiced half-smile. Grace, come in. She sat back straight. He folded himself behind the desk, tapping a capped pen. We'll keep this simple, he said. Tell me in your own words what happened. She did. She kept her voice even. When she reached the slap, the room seemed to narrow, then widen like breathing. You're sure it was a slap? He asked. Mr. Hartley, she said, I have been in rooms where people die. I know the difference between a touch and a strike. He shifted. Right. And you didn't say obstruct his access with intent? I followed protocol, she said. Isolation, gown, mask. Hartley tried a different route. Any prior tension with Dr. Kane?
No, Grace said, a pause.
Is there anything else you want to add? She thought of the woman's calm voice in the hall. She thought of how the room had obeyed it, how even chaos had set its hands down. I want to add, Grace said. That help arrived at the right time. Hartley's pen hovered. From whom? A supervisor, Grace said carefully. Name? Grace met his eyes. She didn't introduce herself. He scribbled anyway, a placeholder for a fact he didn't have. We'll be in touch, he said finally. Please don't discuss this with colleagues. People saw it, she said. Silence won't unsee it, he gave that weak smile again. We just want to protect everyone. Grace stood. Protecting everyone starts with telling the truth. In the hall, she leaned against the wall a second and breathed out. Her phone buzzed. A text from a nursing group thread, memes about bad coffee, a reminder about hand hygiene. The small normalcy steadied her. She returned to the elevator. As the doors parted, Dr. Kane stepped out. They met in the narrowing space between them. He stopped. So did she. The quiet was awkward and loud at once. "Ms. Miller," he said. "Nurse Miller," she corrected softly. His mouth did something like a wince and a nod. "Nurse Miller." He seemed about to speak, then didn't. She held his gaze without heat. "You have patience," she said. He stepped aside. "We both do." They passed. The doors closed between them with a hush that sounded like choice. Back at the ED, Evelyn had posted a notice. "In service at 3 p.m., reinforcing isolation protocols." Attendance encouraged. It was the kind of message that said more than it printed. "Good," Grace murmured. "Good as a beginning," Evelyn replied. They moved through the early afternoon like rowers keeping pace, small nods and quiet jokes keeping the boat straight. A toddler balanced near the gurney's footboard and giggled. A paramedic told a story about a dog that refused to leave its owner's side. The department's ordinary heroism resumed its humble work. Then the elevator pinged. The woman from upstairs walked in alone, no coat now. She had the look of someone who knew which doors to open with words and which with quiet. Evelyn straightened. Norman stood folding the last of his sticker boats. The woman's gaze found Grace. It held relief and resolve, as if a decision had ripened. "Ms. Miller," she said. "Nurse Miller," Evelyn corrected, gentle but firm. The woman smiled at that. "Nurse Miller," she said, as if she preferred the title anyway. "Could we talk a moment?" Privately. Grace glanced at Evelyn, who nodded. They stepped to a quiet nook near the family room, where the rain sound drew closer again like applause far away. "I wanted to check on you," the woman said. "First." "I'm fine," Grace said. "I watched the footage," the woman continued, "and spoke to the director." Grace's throat tightened, a feeling like a door she wasn't ready to open. "Thank you." "You didn't deserve what happened," the woman said, "and it won't be ignored." Grace studied her the way you memorize a lighthouse: shape, steadiness, reason for existing. "You speak like this place belongs to you," Grace said, then flushed. "I mean, like you belong to it." The woman's smile was small and real. "I do," she said softly. "More than most know." She glanced toward the nurse's station, then back. "We'll be in touch, Nurse Miller." "Very soon." The woman turned to leave, then paused, as if she'd nearly added something and chose to save it for the right room, the right time. Grace watched her go, a question blooming where bruises had been. Behind her, Evelyn whispered, "I think the storm's moving." Grace nodded. "Toward us or away?" Evelyn tilted her head at the approaching footsteps from the admin corridor. "Either way, we're not standing in the rain alone." The footsteps stopped at the threshold. A firm voice spoke to the room at large. "May I have everyone's attention, please? Part 3, Act 2A, The Room That Watched, only 60 words. May I have everyone's attention, please?" The emergency department held its breath. Monitors softened to a polite chorus. The woman from upstairs stood near the central desk, hands loosely clasped, posture steady. Director Harold Pierce took his place a few feet behind her, not in front. That alone made people look twice. Evelyn stepped to Grace's side. Norman the volunteer rose from his chair, palms pressed on the counter. A pair of residents drifted closer, quiet as paper. "I'm here for 2 reasons," the woman said. "First, to reinforce safety. Second, to listen." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The calm in it traveled like a ripple. "We had an incident this morning," she continued. "We'll address it through the right process with respect for everyone involved. Meanwhile, protocol is not optional. Isolation lines mean pause, gown, mask, then proceed." She nodded to the yellow tape line outside room 3. Even the tape seemed to stand a little taller. A paramedic called out, "We do what we're told, usually." "Usually isn't enough when the vulnerable are in our care," the woman replied. Evelyn's mouth tugged into the faintest smile. Someone behind them murmured, "She's good." Someone else, "Who is she?" The woman's eyes passed over names on chest pockets one by one like she was counting a roll call from memory. When her gaze reached Grace, it paused. Not for pity, not for show, but as if planting a pin in a map. Grace held that look for a long beat, then let herself breathe. Pierce cleared his throat. "If any staff saw the incident and would like to give a statement, HR will be here," the woman finished, soft but decisive. "Not tucked away. Transparency begins where it happened. Mike Hartley from HR arrived then, a little late, clutching a tablet. He seemed surprised to find the department already gathered. "We can schedule." "We're here now," the woman said gently. "Let's use now." Hartley managed a nod. Voluntary statements, of course. The elevator pinged. Dr. Leonard Kane stepped out and stopped at the sight of his audience. He didn't flinch, but he recalibrated. He had that surgeon's stillness, no wasted motion, a performance of economy. He moved to stand at the outer ring as if choosing humility. "Dr. Kane," the woman said, acknowledging him with the same measured tone she used for everyone. He inclined his head. "Ma'am. Thank you for being here." There was a murmur in the room, not quite a wave. Grace felt her pulse quicken, a sound held inside skin. The woman opened a small folder. No flourish. Just paper. "We'll begin with facts. At 7:12 a.m. near room 3, an exchange occurred between Dr. Kane and Nurse Grace Miller in the context of an isolation precaution." She kept her eyes on the words, then lifted them to the people. "We'll hear 3 perspectives: volunteer, resident, and family member. After that, we'll reaffirm protocol, and then let everyone return to care. Understood?" Evelyn said, "Yes." The word became many. "Mr. Lewis?" the woman said. Norman straightened. He looked older than he had that morning, and also sturdier. "I was at the desk. I heard voices. I saw Nurse Miller stand by the door and ask for gown and mask. I saw the doctor reach and..." He swallowed. It was a slap. "I heard it. That's what I saw." "Thank you," the woman said. "Dr. Ung?" The resident stepped forward, her navy scrubs creased at the knees. "I hesitated," she said, voice low but clear. "I froze. I'm sorry for that." Nurse Miller was following protocol. "I should have backed her. I didn't." Silence held that confession like glass. Grace felt a knot loosen and tighten at the same time. "Thank you," the woman said again. "Mrs. Dawson?" Mr. Dawson's wife, small gray sweater, hands knotted in a tissue, stood near the family room door. "I heard the sound," she whispered. "I saw Dr. Kane's hand. I don't know who was right about the room. I only know it scared me." Her voice thinned. "My husband needs calm." "We all do," the woman nodded. "You deserve it." "Thank you." She looked around the room. "This is what accountability sounds like. Not a trial, a truth-telling." Kane stepped forward a fraction. "May I respond?" His voice was even, controlled. "Yes," she said. He faced the staff, not the woman. "I moved too quickly," he began. "I let urgency speak too loudly. I intended to redirect a hand, not strike. But intent is less important than impact." Hartley's pen actually paused. Evelyn's eyebrows lifted a notch. Grace felt the words land inside her and scatter. Kane continued, "I'm sorry, Nurse Miller." The apology was shaped precisely, as if he'd practiced it. But there was something in it that did not feel rehearsed. A rough edge he hadn't sanded down. Every face in the room turned toward Grace. A hallway full of eyes, asking a question without sound. She found her answer in breath. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "Protocol remains." "Protocol remains," he echoed. The woman took in the exchange and set it down where it belonged. "We will complete a formal review," she said. "Dr. Kane will step away from the ED for the remainder of the day. Patient coverage is arranged. Nurse Miller, you may choose to finish your shift or transfer to a quieter unit for the afternoon. Your choice is the right one." Grace blinked at the dignity of being offered a choice in public. "I'll stay," she said. "My patients know my face." The woman's mouth softened. "Then that's what we'll do." There was movement, small, practical. A clerk adjusted a schedule. A resident texted coverage. The room, having looked at itself, returned to its work. Before they dispersed, the woman added, "One more reminder. Safety is culture. Culture is daily. If you see something that harms it, even in small ways, speak. To your charge nurse. To HR, to me, to you." Someone asked. "Yes," she said simply. Pierce shifted his weight as if to add the explanation, the titles, the latter. He didn't. He watched her, an odd mixture of pride and caution in his eyes. The gathering broke apart. Monitors swelled back. The rain resumed its gentle drum. Grace stepped aside to a quiet cove near the supply closet and let her shoulders fall an inch. Evelyn joined her. "You okay?" "I don't know yet," Grace said. "But I can breathe. Good start." Evelyn glanced toward the admin corridor. She handled that like she's chaired 100 rooms. She has, Grace said softly, surprised at her own certainty. A shadow fell across the cove. The woman stood there, not intruding, simply present. Nurse Miller, a moment? Grace nodded. Evelyn squeezed her elbow and retreated. I appreciate your steadiness, the woman said. It matters. I'm just doing my job, Grace said. That's what makes it matter, the woman replied. She hesitated, then asked, How's your cheek? Warm, Grace said. Less than before, the woman half smiled. Ice is waiting in the staff freezer, above the popsicles. Old hospital secret, Grace allowed a small laugh. I'll find it. The woman's gaze shifted toward the far wall, where a framed photograph hung. A groundbreaking ceremony from a decade ago. Hard hats, shovels, people smiling at the promise of a building not yet built. In the front row stood Harold Pierce, younger, hair darker. Next to him, a girl in a too-big safety vest, grinning at the camera, one hand clutching a ribbon. Grace followed the look, then back to the woman's face. A likeness moved between them like light. The woman seemed to consider saying something and chose again not to. We'll talk soon, she said instead. Are you new here? Grace asked carefully. Not exactly, the woman said. I've been around. She left it there, a gift wrapped but not opened. As the woman turned to go, Pierce approached from the opposite direction. He stopped beside her and lowered his voice, forgetting how rooms carry whispers. Are you sure you want to do this here? He asked. Where else, she said. This is where it happened. He nodded. A private, familiar nod like the kind two people use when they have walked many hallways together. They headed for the elevator side by side. Security nodded to her with reflexive recognition. Grace watched them go until the doors closed. She exhaled. The room had watched. The room would remember. Norman shuffled up with a paper cup of ice, the top wrapped in a napkin. For the cheek, he said. Thank you, Norman. She pressed it gently to her skin, a cool hand where heat had been. Courage, he said, nudging one of his tiny sticker boats across the counter's edge. We named her earlier, Grace smiled. Then let's keep her afloat. Her pager buzzed. A new patient in Bay 5. Life returning to its next beat. Across the unit, Dr. Ung straightened, then walked toward Grace with a purposeful step. If you ever need a voice beside yours, she said, mine is available. I'll remember, Grace said. They worked. The afternoon lengthened and softened. The rain slowed, then stopped. Light found the windows. Near 3 o'clock, a message pinged on the department board. All hands briefing at 4 p.m., conference 3B. Attendance requested. No signature. No flourish. Evelyn read it, then glanced at Grace. Feels like the next chapter. Grace nodded. Let's see what it writes. She gathered a chart, squared her shoulders, and turned toward the next room. Just as the elevator chimed again and a familiar coat hem appeared, heading not to admin but toward the director's private office. The door clicked shut behind the woman. Inside, something would be said that changed the day's shape. The director's private office muted the hospital's noise to a distant hush, as if the building exhaled on the other side of the door. Framed photographs lined the credenza, ribbon cuttings, award banquets, a charity 5K where staff in matching shirts laughed under a low sun. The woman set a slim folder on Harold Pierce's desk and waited. He removed his glasses, polished them with a square of cloth, then put them back on, buying time. Harold, she said evenly, we need to decide what this place stands for when no one is watching. Because today people watched. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. I know. Then say it, she replied gently. Out loud, he lifted his eyes. We will not let power hush a bruise. A small nod. Good, he leaned back. PR is already pinging me. They want to shape a narrative, donors will call. Let them, she said. We'll give them one story. We protected a nurse and reminded a physician that a hand meant to heal cannot harm. And Dr. Kane? Harold asked. We'll hear everything, she said. And act. Accountability, not spectacle. He turned the folder around. She slid it back. He is excellent in the OR, Harold murmured, half to himself. He saved so many. Excellence is not immunity, she said. That's for infectious disease. A reluctant smile flickered. You always were surgical with words. Comes from watching good surgeons, she said, eyes dipping to a photo of him at a residency graduation. A younger man with the same careful posture, a girl in a floral dress beside him, holding a ridiculous balloon. There was a knock. Mike Hartley edged in, tablet hugged to his chest. "Briefing is set for 4, he said, glancing between them. "I've never done one like this." "Good," the woman said. "Then we're not doing the old thing," Hartley swallowed. "I've spoken with legal. They advise we keep statements narrow, no admission of liability on the hospital's part, and—" "We'll be precise," she said. "Precision isn't silence," Harold waved Hartley closer. "Bring the policy manual." Hartley nodded and left as quietly as he'd come. The woman looked at Harold. "I'll lead the room. You back the room?" "Yes," he said, then added softer. "Are you sure you want to stand there?" "Where else?" she asked. "The harm happened there." He didn't argue. Downstairs, Grace held a paper cup of ice to her cheek, then returned it to the napkin in her palm. The cool was honest. She tucked the cup beside Norman's little fleet of sticker boats. "Guard this," she told him. "With my life," he said solemnly, then brightened. "Or at least until my lunch break." Dr. Ung approached with a clipboard. "We're covered for 4 o'clock, she said. "I swapped with Trevor." "Thank you," Grace said, and she hesitated. "He shouldn't have touched you." "I'm sorry I froze." "You spoke today," Grace said. "That matters." "Speaking late is still late," Ung murmured. "Late is not never," Grace replied, and Ung exhaled a breath she'd been holding since morning. Evelyn drifted over. "You come sit by me at the briefing," she said to Grace. "I'd like my eyes on you in case you forget to breathe." Grace tucked a smile into her pocket like a note. "Yes, ma'am." Across the department, Dr. Kane stepped out of an exam room, his coat neatly buttoned, his expression restrained. He paused at the nurse's station. "Any updates on Mr. Dawson?" he asked, voice professional. "Stable," Evelyn said without decoration. "Good," Kane replied and moved on. He did not look at Grace, but he reduced his speed by a half-step when passing her, as if careful now around gravity. He stopped at a hand sanitizer dispenser, pressed once, rubbed his palms until dry. Motion for its own sake. He glanced at the family photo on the wall, the one with the groundbreaking and the girl in the too big vest. He'd noticed that photo 100 times, never seeing it. Today it tugged at something he couldn't name. His pager buzzed. A message from admin. 4 p.m. Conference 3B. Attendance mandatory. He slipped the pager back, straightened his cuff. He had rehearsed contrition twice in his head on the way down from HR, and both times it sounded like a textbook read aloud. He shut the book. He didn't know what to say. That was new. At 3:52 p.m., the corridor outside Conference 3B filled with the shuffling of shoes and the hush of waiting. Rainlight slanted through a high window, turning dust into chainmail. Grace walked with Evelyn. Their steps matched. Norman joined. Volunteer vest zipped to his chin as if for armor. Inside, chairs were arranged in a U, not a rectangle pretending to be a table where only some had edges. A pitcher of water sweated on a side counter. Copies of the Workplace Conduct and Safety Policy sat in a neat stack, corners aligned. Harold stood near the front, hands clasped. The woman adjusted the microphone, then didn't use it, moving it aside. Her voice didn't need a speaker to be heard. "Thank you for coming," she began. "We'll start on time and finish on purpose." Heads lifted. Pen stilled. "We are a hospital," she said. "We carry strangers' worst days. That burden requires courage and kindness. We don't get to choose one. This afternoon we will acknowledge harm that happened in a hallway and commit together to something better." She gestured to Hartley, who opened the policy binder like a book everyone should know by heart. "Our standard is not new," she said. "But today we choose to live it." Kane sat near the end of the U, spine straight, hands folded. He had thought he would feel cornered by being on the outside edge. Instead, he felt seen. It was not the same thing. Harold addressed the group. "In brief, there will be a formal review conducted by administration and HR. Dr. Kane will step back from the ED today and until further notice while that review is completed. Support is available for any staff who want to debrief." A murmur. Grace felt Evelyn's hand settle lightly on her forearm, then leave. A reminder and a release. "Before we continue," the woman said, "I want to make a personal statement." The room stilled more. "I came to this department this morning because I heard raised voices," she said. "I stayed because I saw courage and a breach of it. to the nurse who held a line for safety, and to the residents and volunteers who spoke thank you. Her gaze found Grace. There was no announcement, no unveiling, only human sight. Still something moved under the words like a current finding shore. Kane looked from the woman to Harold and a shape formed, a resemblance he could no longer ignore. It sat in the lines around the mouth, the measured cadence, the way both paused before decisions. His mind found the photograph in the hallway, the girl with the ribbon. He understood it all at once in the space between two heartbeats, and the knowledge landed in his chest like a weight he'd been pretending not to feel. He sat straighter, not out of pride now, but out of recognition. He had injured more than a nurse. He had affronted a house that remembered the names on its beams. The woman continued, "We will not turn this into a spectacle. We will, however, make our commitments explicit." She lifted a paper, effective immediately. Refresher training on isolation protocols for all attending staff, including physicians. A clear pathway for nurses to stop a procedure for safety without retaliation. A post-incident support process led by our behavioral health team. Hartley scribbled notes he would type up later with trembling care. "Questions?" she asked. A young tech raised a hand. "What happens if someone ignores the stop?" "Then someone with authority will stand beside the person who said stop," she said. "And we will hold the line together." Grace felt her shoulders loosen by a measure she could measure. Kane stood. "May I speak?" The woman inclined her head. Briefly, he faced the room. "I failed a standard today," he said. "Regardless of intent, I caused harm. To Nurse Miller and to the room." He paused, swallowed. "I apologize to you, Nurse Miller." Eyes turned to Grace as if carried by a tide. There were 100 ways to answer, each with its own echo. She chose the one that left the door open to light. "Thank you," she said. "May we follow the standard together tomorrow?" He nodded, not because it sounded good, but because it was the only sentence that felt like a way forward. The woman closed her folder. "Thank you, Dr. Kane." She let the words rest. Neither exoneration nor condemnation, only the acknowledgement a step deserves. Harold added, "We'll provide updates as we move." Chairs creaked as people stood. Conversations bloomed small and low. The work of making a better afternoon began, inch by inch. As the room thinned, the woman approached Grace and Evelyn. She hesitated, then glanced at Grace's badge. The cracked corner caught a bar of light, revealing the tiny embossed emblem. A discreet oak leaf and the initials HPF burned into the plastic's edge. Grace had assumed it was a vendor's flourish. The woman touched the air by it, not quite touching the badge itself. "Old Foundation logo," she said. "We should probably retire it." "We kept it for history. HPF?" Grace asked. The woman's eyes warmed. "Hospital Partnership Fund," she said. Then, after a beat, "and something older than that." Evelyn studied the letters, then the woman's face. A comprehension dawned she did not voice. "Thank you for standing where it mattered," the woman said to Grace. "Not everyone does." "It was my job," Grace replied. "It was more," the woman said. "And it will change things." She stepped back. People filtered out. Norman lingered at the door with a paper boat cupped in his palm like a talisman he wasn't ready to surrender. Kane paused near the exit, eyes on the floor, then lifted them to the woman. He tried "ma'am," and then stopped as if that word weren't precise enough for what he now knew. He settled on silence, a humility he'd not worn often. The woman nodded to him. A simple acknowledgement that truth had been spoken, work remained. The room emptied. The rain had slowed to mist. Beyond the window, the city steadied on its own feet again. Evelyn touched Grace's shoulder. "Home," she urged. "Soon," Grace said. "I'll check Bay 5 once more." She stepped into the corridor. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar song. Her badge swung against her chest, tapping lightly like a heartbeat. The little crack glinted, a quiet signature waiting to be read fully. Behind her in the doorway, Harold and the woman exchanged a look that carried years, secrets kept and ready to be told. He opened his mouth to speak her name, but she shook her head once. "Wait." The elevator chimed. Somewhere, a printer spat out a single page. Staff update. Interim measures. Grace turned toward the ED, unaware that the next time her badge flipped, it would reveal not just a logo, but a lineage that would turn power in the room on its hinge. Part 5. Twist A. The name on the back of the badge. 120 words. Bay 5 smelled faintly of antiseptic and winter coats. A man with a wrist sprain flexed his fingers while Grace rewrapped his bandage, the gauze whispering around bone. She checked capillary refill, noted pain level, offered a simple stretch to do at home. Work steadied breath. Kindness steadied hands. Outside the curtain, the hospital's afternoon hummed, monitors like patient metronomes, wheels making soft arguments with tile. Rain had thinned to mist, a light that turned windows to milk. Grace stepped into the hall and nearly bumped into Harold Pierce. He didn't wear his director's expression, the one that could quiet a boardroom. He wore a father's face he hadn't let anyone see since she'd joined the hospital. His eyes swept her cheek first, always first, then the space around them as if evaluating safety. "Kiddo," he said, too softly for anyone beyond 3 feet to hear. Grace's breath caught. "Not here," she murmured. He nodded once, then added almost formally, "Nurse Miller, may I speak with you in the family alcove?" Evelyn glanced over, caught the tone under the tone, and shepherded Bay 5's discharge with the discretion of a general. In the alcove near the family room, a low lamp warmed 2 chairs. A box of tissues sat untouched between them. The building's HVAC sighed above like a great animal asleep. Harold stood. Grace stood. Neither sat. He reached into his jacket and produced a small plastic sleeve, the kind that holds backup IDs. Inside lay a fresh hospital badge already programmed, a clean laminate without a crack. He held it flat on his palm. "You don't have to take this," he said. "You can keep the old one." "Your choice." Grace looked down. The front read, "Grace Miller, RN, Emergency." Same title. Same photo. But in the lower corner, where her cracked badge had the tiny embossed emblem, this one held a clearer mark. An oak leaf. The initials HPF, and beneath them, in microtext, "Immediate family, emergency contact file on record." Her mouth went dry. "Dad?" He shook his head gently. In the hall, anyone could pass. "Harold," he corrected, and then quieter. "No one needs to know unless you want them to." Across the corridor, Norman hovered by his sticker fleet, pretending mightily not to look. Dr. Ung paused by a dispenser, hands stilled in sanitizer foam. The hospital learned to look without staring. Grace thumbed her old badge, felt the hairline crack, the calming tap of the clip. That small click had guided her through so many storms. "I wanted to earn every hallway without your name," she said. "That was the agreement." "And you have," Harold replied. "Every inch. You told me you needed the same ground as anyone else, and I honored it. But the ground shifted this morning." Her eyes flicked to his, then away. "Are you asking me to be your daughter in public?" "I'm asking if you want to be safe in public," he said, a weariness in his voice that did not belong to the director. "Names shouldn't grant safety. Culture should. But until culture catches up, let's give it help." She looked at the microtext again. "Immediate family emergency contact file on record." It was not a crown. It was a lifeline. Her silence became a weighing. "Harold," she said, choosing the professional syllables because they steadied her. "The woman from upstairs. Who is she?" He almost smiled. "Charlotte Reed, Chief Operating Officer." He added after a beat, "Not my daughter." Grace exhaled a breath she hadn't known she was holding. "She stood like a person who built the room," Grace said. "She helped build it," he answered. "With a lot of us, including you." Footsteps approached. Dr. Leonard Kane, white coat buttoned, came around the corner and stopped when he saw them. He hadn't aimed to walk here. He had drifted on reflex, pulled by the gravity of the person he'd wronged and the person he reported to. "Director Pierce," he said, then to Grace. "Nurse Miller." Harold inclined his head. "Doctor." Kane's eyes dropped to the plastic sleeve in Harold's hand, then to the cracked badge in Grace's. He noticed the tiny emblem he'd ignored all year, really seeing it now. The oak leaf, the initials HPF, and something unlocked in his mind. The groundbreaking photo in the hallway, the child in the too big vest, the way administrators and security greeted Grace with a nod that carried more than courtesy. His face drained of a certainty he had worn like armor. He began, then stopped. Charlotte Reed stepped out of a nearby doorway as if she'd arrived on the lift of that paused syllable. She didn't look surprised to see the three of them together. "Grace," Charlotte said kindly. "Director, Dr. Kane." Kane straightened to the dignity of someone about to lose something and wanting to lose it well. "Ms. Reed," he said. "May I?" She lifted a palm. In a moment. Grace slid her old badge back onto the lanyard, the crack catching the light like a small scar. She didn't take the new one yet. Instead, she turned the old badge over, the plastic resisting, then flipping. The emergency contact info printed discreetly on the back stared up. Primary, Harold Pierce. Relation, father. Harold closed his eyes once, like a man stepping into cold water he knew would be good for him. Kane saw the words as plainly as a diagnostic scan. The room narrowed with their meaning and then widened to fit it. He spoke to Grace, not to the title standing beside her. "You chose to work under another name," he said. "To stand in the same lines as everyone else." "I did," Grace said, voice quiet. "And I—" He stopped again, collecting language that didn't bruise. "I failed you twice. Once as a colleague. Once as a member of this place. Harold didn't rescue him. Charlotte didn't rescue him. No one rescued anyone. They let truth stand up on its own legs." Kane cleared his throat. "Director Pierce, Ms. Reed, whatever consequences you decide are appropriate, I accept. But before that, Nurse Miller, I need to say this as if no one else were here." Grace waited. "I saw a barrier," he said, "and I mistook you for it. You were the line that saves lives. I should have stood with you." Grace held his gaze, then nodded once. "Thank you." He glanced at the microtext again and then back at her face. "If I had known—" Charlotte's eyes sharpened. "Doctor." He met her look and corrected himself. "I should not have needed to know." "Good," Charlotte said softly. A silence like clean linen settled over them. Harold turned to Grace. "My decision stands from the briefing," he said. "Formal review, interim measures. But before we move, I want to ask you something that's yours alone to answer." Grace's brows knit. "Okay, do you want this known?" he asked. He didn't gesture toward the badge. He didn't need to. "Your relation to me publicly." Grace's heart stepped. Around them the hospital continued, oblivious to the hinge in this small alcove. A monitor down the hall sounded a polite alarm. A nurse moved to silence it with practiced hands. She looked at the two badges, the old one with its scar and secret, the new one with its clarity, and remembered her first day, the camera flash, the way the laminate had cooled against her chest like a promise. She remembered study nights, the scholarship letter with the oak leaf in the corner, the quiet pride of a father who sat in the back row of her pinning ceremony and clapped like a man who had built a bridge and watched others cross it. "I didn't hide because I was ashamed," she said at last. "I hid because I wanted to prove to myself and to the room that I belonged for what I do, not for who I'm related to." "You've proved it," Harold said. She swallowed. The decision rose like a tide and then set. "Then I want both truths to stand," she said. "I am Nurse Grace Miller, and I am your daughter. If that helps us fix the culture faster, I'll carry it." Something in Harold's shoulders released that had been tight all morning. "Okay," he said simply. Charlotte nodded once. "Then we'll do it plainly." Kane seemed to shrink and grow at the same time. He understood that the apology he'd made at 4 o'clock had lived in a smaller world than the one he stood in now. "Dr. Kane," Charlotte said, voice balanced, "there will be immediate steps. But before we formalize, I want you to hear this from the person you harmed." She looked to Grace. Grace didn't raise her chin like a gavel. She kept it level. "I want to come back tomorrow and not flinch when I see your coat," she said. "I want the residents to freeze less and speak more. I want the next nurse who says stop for isolation to feel a hand at her shoulder, not on her face." Kane's eyes burned in the way a man's do when they've met a mirror and kept looking. "Then that is the day I'll build," he said. Harold slid the new badge across the small table between chairs, not pressing it into her hand, just setting it down like a tool for a task she had chosen. Grace picked it up, weighed it, then unclipped the old one. The small click of the lanyard echoed more than it should have. She slipped the new badge into place. It settled against her heart with a cool certainty. "Let's go tell the room the truth," Charlotte said. Harold nodded. "We'll do it now." No fanfare. Kane didn't move. "Director Pierce," he said. Harold waited. "After we tell them," Kane said, I would like to step into every nurse huddle on this floor and listen. Not talk. Listen. Harold studied him, then gave a single difficult nod. Good. They stepped into the corridor. The fluorescent lights hummed. Norman looked up from his boats, eyes bright. Charlotte's heels started their deliberate click toward the central desk. Harold took one step, then another. Grace's new badge flashed in the light. Oak leaf. Initials, Truth. And at the end of the hall, a small cluster of staff turned at once as if a weather change had passed through the building and opened every window on the floor. The corridor filled slowly the way tides rise. First a hush, then motion. Nurses drifted in from stations, techs leaned against the wall, residents lined the counter. A quiet expectancy charged the air. Grace walked beside her father and Charlotte Reed, the new badge resting cool against her chest. The small oak leaf gleamed like a secret ready to breathe. Charlotte stopped at the nurse's desk. "Everyone," she said, "may I have a minute?" The clatter of keyboards subsided. Even the automatic doors seemed to pause their sighing. "This morning," she continued, "we saw an incident that tested who we are. We have begun repairing that. But there's something else you deserve to know because transparency is how trust begins again." She glanced toward Harold Pierce. He nodded once, his hand light on the desk's edge. Charlotte's voice stayed calm. "Many of you already sensed it. Nurse Grace Miller has earned every inch of her place here. She's worked nights, double shifts, tough rooms. What you didn't know is that she's also the daughter of our director." A murmur swept the room. Quick, startled, not unkind. "She asked that this not be public," Charlotte said, "because she wanted to be measured by her work, not her name." She succeeded. "Today we make that fact plain so the story belongs to all of us, not to rumor." Grace felt the weight shift around her. Some faces registered surprise, others respect. Evelyn's eyes brimmed. Norman grinned outright. Harold stepped forward, careful not to eclipse his daughter. "Grace came here under her mother's name, Miller, to learn what the system feels like without shortcuts. I'm proud of that. I'm prouder of the courage she showed when courage cost her comfort." He paused. "As director, I apologize to this staff for what happened under my roof. As a father, I thank the person who stopped pretending the chain of command mattered more than human decency." He looked toward Charlotte. That person was Charlotte Reed. The staff clapped once, hesitant, then steadier. Charlotte's cheeks colored, but her voice remained firm. "Applause isn't policy. Policy is what we build now." She turned to Dr. Kane. "Doctor?" He stepped forward. His white coat looked suddenly heavy. "I have no defense. Only accountability. I misused authority and forgot that titles don't measure worth. I will be stepping back from patient duties for reflection and retraining, and I've asked to join the Safety Review Board as a non-voting member. To listen, not to lead." He faced Grace fully. "Thank you for making me see the hospital I want to believe in." Grace met his gaze. "Then make it real for the next person." A ripple of agreement passed through the staff. Small nods, the sound of people exhaling the day's tension. Charlotte raised a hand. "Before we return to patients, one more thing." She lifted Grace's cracked old badge, which Evelyn had placed on the desk earlier. The fissure caught the light like a thin vein of silver. "This," she said, "stayed strong even when it cracked. That's what integrity looks like." She set it beside the new badge. "Both stay in this department's case file, a reminder that fixing systems doesn't mean erasing scars." Norman, voice soft but carrying, asked, "So what happens now, ma'am?" Charlotte smiled faintly. "Now we go back to work, better." Evelyn clapped her hands once, brisk. "You heard the lady. Let's move." The room stirred. Monitors beeping again, pagers lighting, purpose rediscovered. Yet an undercurrent of pride ran beneath the routine, quiet and strong. Later, in the staff lounge, Grace leaned against the counter while the coffee machine grumbled through another cycle. The air smelled of burnt beans and new beginnings. Charlotte joined her, rolling up her sleeves. "You did well," Grace laughed softly. "All I did was stand still." "That's harder than it looks," Charlotte said. "Your father used to say stillness is where leadership starts." Grace tilted her head. "You knew him back then?" "We trained together," Charlotte said. "He learned patience. I learned paperwork." She smiled, then sobered. "He built this hospital's culture. You just reminded it to stay awake." Grace sipped her coffee, grimaced at the taste, and smiled anyway. "Then we're all awake now." "Good," Charlotte said, "because tomorrow you'll be helping me draft a new safety protocol." Nurse led stoppage authority. You earned the right to write it, Grace blinked. Me? You, Charlotte confirmed. Who else? In his office upstairs, Harold Pierce watched the security footage one last time before filing it under closed. Resolution achieved. The sound had been restored, the slap, the gasp, and then the silence before Charlotte's voice. He clicked save. The file would remain, not as evidence of scandal, but as proof of change. A notification pinged. Employee recognition submission, Grace Miller. Courage in clinical practice. He smiled, unchecked the anonymity box, and hit submit. Evening fell over Seattle, the rain beginning again softer this time. The emergency department glowed through the glass like a living heart. Grace walked the corridor one last round before shift change. Mr. Dawson was asleep, his wife dozing beside him. Dr. Ung nodded at Grace, a silent "we're okay." Evelyn hummed as she entered vitals into the system. At the desk, Norman adjusted his fleet of sticker boats. He'd added one more, tiny white with the word truth scribbled in pen across its bow. Permission to launch? He asked. Always, Grace said. He flicked it gently. The little boat glided across the countertop, bumping softly against Courage. The two stayed side by side. Grace smiled, then turned as footsteps approached. Dr. Kane stood there, coat off now, sleeves rolled, a clipboard in hand. I'd like to shadow the night shift tomorrow, he said. To learn, not supervise. With your permission. Protocol allows observation, she replied evenly. He nodded. Then I'll be here. Thank you. When he left, Evelyn whispered, Well, that's new. Grace watched him go. Maybe so. But it's a start. She lifted her badge, the new one gleaming in the soft light, and turned it over. On the back, beside the printed contact line, someone, Charlotte, she guessed, had written in neat ink, Leadership. See also Grace. She laughed quietly, tucked it back. The world outside was wet and gray, but inside, the hum of machines and footsteps blended into a steady rhythm that felt like progress. The PA crackled. Code clear, all units stable. For once, everyone believed it. Upstairs, Harold stood at his window watching the drizzle halo the city lights. He heard his daughter's laugh carry faintly from the floor below, and for the first time in a long while, the sound didn't make him worry. It made him proud. Charlotte joined him, arms crossed. You're thinking about the next board meeting. Always, he admitted. Don't. He looked at her. Then what should I think about? She nodded toward the glowing floor below. About the fact that the hospital just remembered its heart has a daughter. He smiled at that, a small, tired, honest smile. Maybe the heart learned something today. It did, she said. It learned to listen. Outside, the rain intensified, a steady, cleansing rhythm. Downstairs, Grace clocked out, slipped her cracked badge into her pocket, and headed for the exit. The automatic doors opened with their familiar whoosh, releasing her into the cool Seattle evening. The street smelled of rain and possibility. She looked once at her reflection in the glass, the faint mark on her cheek almost gone, the badge gleaming against her scrubs, and whispered to herself, not for the cameras, not for the viewers, but for the night. Dignity always counts. Then she stepped into the rain. The ED gathered without being asked, like iron filings finding a magnet. Keyboard stilled. Wheels braked. The rain against the glass kept time. Grace stood beside Charlotte Reed and director Harold Pierce. Her new badge rested against her scrubs, oak leaf, microtext, cool as a coin just minted. Norman hovered at the corner of the desk with his little fleet. The sticker boat named Courage nudged to the front. Charlotte didn't touch the mic. Thank you for pausing, she said. This will be brief and clear. Eyes lifted, some wary, some hopeful. Evelyn folded her arms loosely, a stance that said ready. This morning a line was crossed, Charlotte continued. We've begun to repair it. Formal review, temporary reassignment, support. Now, transparency. She glanced to Harold, who gave a single nod and stayed a step behind. Nurse Grace Miller earned her place the same way you did. Exams, night shifts, hard rooms, Charlotte said. She also happens to be Director Pierce's daughter. She chose privacy to be measured by her work. Today, with her consent, we're saying it plainly so rumor doesn't do our storytelling for us. A small collective intake of breath. Then the room did what real rooms do with truth. It steadied. A resident's posture softened. A tech smiled into his collar. Evelyn's jaw worked once, twice, then set in approval. Harold stepped forward without eclipsing Grace. As director, he said, I apologize that harm occurred under my roof. As a father, I'm grateful to the person who refused to let authority outrun safety. He tipped his head toward Charlotte, and to the nurse who held the line. Grace lifted a hand, not to claim the moment, but to root it. Please, let's keep this about protocol, she said. And about tomorrow, Charlotte nodded. About tomorrow. She set Grace's cracked badge on the counter beside a printed one-page sheet. The fissure flashed like a silver thread. 2 immediate steps. 1. Nurse-led stop authority. If any RN calls a safety stop, all action pauses until the charge nurse clears. 2. Attending retraining on isolation compliance. That includes surgeons. Her gaze flicked briefly and precisely to Dr. Leonard Kane. Kane stood near the outer ring, white coat buttoned, palms open at his sides. I misused urgency, he said before she could invite him. Regardless of intent, I caused harm. I will step back from ED duties and complete retraining. With permission, I'd like to sit in on nurse huddles to listen. Listening isn't a privilege, Evelyn said evenly. It's basic, Kane inclined his head. Then I'll meet the basic. Charlotte rested a fingertip on the one-page sheet. We'll refine this with your input. For now, consider it active, hands went up. A tech. If a family member pressures us to skip steps, point to the policy, Charlotte said. And to me, a resident. Retaliation for calling a stop? Harold answered. Non-negotiable, none. You'll have a direct line to me and Ms. Reed if anything wobbles. Grace felt a knot that had lived all day loosened by a measurable inch. She let her shoulders drop the way you do when someone else finally picks up their side of the mattress. Norman lifted his voice, gentle. And the patient in room 3? Stable, Dr. Ung said quickly, stepping forward as if to shield the room from worry. Thanks to isolation being kept. Eyes returned to Grace, gratitude like a low tide around her shoes. She didn't step back. She didn't step forward. She held ground. Charlotte picked up the cracked badge. We're not replacing this in the file, she said. We're keeping it with the new one. We don't erase scars to prove healing. Evelyn clapped once, only once, brisk. Okay, team. Protocol is policy and policy is culture. Back to patients, the room exhaled. Monitors resumed their polite chirps. Wheels argued with tile again, yet the sound had changed, less brittle, more tuned. Kane lingered. Nurse Miller, he said. Grace turned. Dr. Kane. I'm sorry, he said simply, not over-explaining, not sandpapering the truth. For the slap. For the message it sent. Then help send a different one, Grace replied. Every time it's harder. He looked at her new badge, then at the old one on the counter. You earned both. Let's earn the air in this hallway, she said. He nodded and stepped back, unusual quiet in the space he took with him. In the staff lounge, the coffee machine grumbled. Charlotte rinsed a mug she probably didn't have time to rinse. You redirected the whole room with a sentence, she said, glancing at Grace. Which one? Grace asked. About tomorrow. Charlotte smiled. That's leadership. Grace blew across the rim of bad coffee. You stood where it hurt. It hurt less because you had already done the hard part. Charlotte set the mug down. Tomorrow morning, 7:30, conference room B, drafting the stop protocol. You, me, Evelyn, a resident, a tech. We'll write it clean. Grace nodded, surprised to hear yes come out of her mouth before the fear could clear its throat. I'll be there. Charlotte tapped the cracked badge on the counter with a knuckle. Keep this, she said. I thought we were filing it, Grace said. We are, Charlotte replied. But you should carry it once more. For the walk home, Grace slid the broken badge into her scrub pocket. It felt like a story you don't want to lose. Upstairs, Harold stood by his window. Seattle a soft geometry of drizzle and light. He opened an email draft, typed, deleted, then wrote, To board and donors. Today we enforced our values. Questions welcome. We chose dignity over optics. He hit send before he could second-guess the tone. A new message pinged almost instantly from a major donor. Proud of the stand. How can we help the nurses? Harold smiled. Not the director's practiced version. The father's. Near shift change, Grace made one last loop. Mr. Dawson breathed steadily. His wife slept with her hand in his. Dr. Ung caught Grace's eye and offered a small thumbs up. Evelyn adjusted the whiteboard and without looking up said, "Check your ice." Grace laughed. "The cheek's fine." "Good. Then teach me that sentence you used on the doctor," Evelyn said. "The one that didn't light the room on fire." "I borrowed it," Grace said. "From my dad." "Figures," Evelyn murmured, not surprised anymore. At the desk, Norman's sticker fleet had gained a new boat, neat block letters penned on the bow. Policy. He nudged it so policy settled between courage and truth. "Trio," he announced. "Unsinkable, provided we don't step on them." Grace grinned. "Clear the walkway." Kane approached, coat off now, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He carried a notepad, old school, a small concession that said, "I'm here to record, not to perform." "Evening huddle?" he asked Evelyn. "You can stand in the back," she said. "And if you talk, it's to repeat a nurse's point louder." Kane didn't bristle. "Deal." He looked at Grace. "Tomorrow?" 7:30, she said. "Bring attention." "I will." He moved on. Grace watched him go, measuring the distance between remorse and repair. It wasn't short, but it had a path now. She reached into her pocket and touched the cracked badge once. The plastic's fissure pressed a line into her palm. She let it, a small inkless signature. The PA clicked on. "Code clear. All units stable." For the first time that day, the sentence felt earned. Grace stepped to the sliding doors. The glass offered her a faint reflection, the cheek nearly unmarked, the badge gleaming, the posture a fraction taller. She whispered a promise no one else needed to hear. "Tomorrow better," she said. Beyond the doors, the Seattle evening waited. Rain softened to lace. Inside, the room she loved, flawed, learning, kept breathing. Part 7. Fallout. The morning after. 130 words. The next morning dawned gray over Seattle, the kind of light that smudged edges and asked the city to start over. The hospital, however, didn't sleep. It merely shifted. At 6:45 a.m., Grace stood by the vending machines with a lukewarm coffee, watching rain glide down the window. Her new badge reflected faintly in the glass. Oak leaf, initials calm. The cracked one rested in her pocket like an old coin. Evelyn joined her, tugging her sweater tighter. "Did you sleep?" "A little," Grace said. "Eat?" "Coffee counts if you chew the foam," Grace said, and earned a soft laugh. Evelyn handed her a sealed breakfast bar. "Eat. We have the safety draft meeting in 15 minutes. Charlotte doesn't strike me as a start-late kind of woman." Grace smiled. Neither was my father, apparently. They both glanced down the hallway where Director Pierce's office light already glowed. "Different morning, huh?" Evelyn said. "Feels like the air knows something changed." Grace nodded. It did. At 7:30 sharp, the small group gathered in conference room B. Grace, Evelyn, Dr. Eng, a tech named Carlos, and Charlotte Reed. A whiteboard stood ready, half erased, markers uncapped. Charlotte set a stack of papers down. "Today we turn yesterday's promises into written policy. No grand speeches. Just rules that keep people safe." Carlos adjusted his glasses. "You mean if a nurse says stop, everyone stops?"
"Exactly," Charlotte said.
"Clear chain of protection. Grace, walk us through what happened from your perspective, minute by minute." Grace inhaled slowly and described it. Each sound, each instruction, each ignored warning. Her tone stayed even, factual. She didn't dramatize. When she finished, Charlotte tapped her pen on the table. "What could have prevented escalation?" Evelyn said, "Immediate verbal reinforcement. A code phrase that carries weight beyond tone, something that freezes the room." "Like a safe word for patient safety," Dr. Ung murmured. Carlos suggested, "Maybe color-coded, red stop for hazard. Blue stop for contamination." Charlotte wrote on the board, "Red stop, full freeze. Blue stop, an isolation breach," Grace added. "And documentation afterward, automatic HR and admin notification, not optional." Charlotte nodded. "I'll see to it that IT builds that form into our system this week." They worked for an hour, rewriting a culture sentence by sentence. Grace watched their pens move and realized she was no longer an observer in the hospital's story. She was part of its voice. By 8:40, Charlotte stood back from the whiteboard. "We'll circulate this by noon." Evelyn organized department sign-offs. Dr. Ung, brief residence. "Grace, you'll introduce it in today's afternoon huddle." "Me?" Grace asked. Charlotte smiled. Who else can? Evelyn chuckled. Told you she'd make you work. Across the hospital, Dr. Leonard Kane stood before a mirror in the staff locker room. His reflection looked older than yesterday, though the day hadn't earned the years. He'd turned in his badge for reassignment. The bare lanyard hung around his neck like an unfinished sentence. He rehearsed the phrase he would need most. I was wrong. There was no elegant way to say it. So he practiced plainness instead, repeating the words under his breath until they lost their sting and kept their weight. When he walked through the halls, people didn't part like before. They didn't glare either. They simply saw him. That somehow felt heavier. At 9:00, he arrived in the education wing where new nurses trained. The lead instructor greeted him with a cautious handshake. Observing today? Yes, he said. Listening? The instructor gestured to the back. Plenty of seats for that. Kane took one, folded his hands, and watched Grace's image projected on the orientation slide. Nurse Grace Miller, ED Mentor of the Month. The room applauded. He did too, quietly, sincerely. Back in the ED, the noon lull brought relative calm. A toddler's laughter bounced from one bay to another. The scent of reheated soup wafted from the lounge. Grace reviewed discharge notes until Charlotte's message pinged on her tablet. Approved. Announce red blue stop at 2 p.m. Include your line about tomorrow. Grace smiled. That line, tomorrow better, had already started circling in whispers through the staff. Evelyn poked her head in. Ready for the show? Ready as anyone can be before public speaking, Grace said. Then let's give them a reason to clap between emergencies. At 2 p.m., the intercom chime sounded. All ED staff to Central for quick huddle. Grace stood at the center desk. Every face from yesterday's storm was there. Dr. Ung, Carlos, Norman, even Kane silent near the back. She cleared her throat. We've got a new procedure born from an old lesson. It's called the red-blue stop. She explained the protocol, color calls, full pause, instant notification. She spoke clearly, hands steady on the desk. Evelyn passed out cards printed with the summary. If you hear a red or blue stop, freeze. Safety before speed. When Grace finished, the room was quiet, the good kind. Dr. Ung was first to clap, then Evelyn. Then everyone. Grace held up a hand. We don't clap for problems, she said. We clap for change. Laughter broke the tension. Norman raised one of his little boats. Then the fleet's expanding, he said. Meet change. Everyone laughed again. Grace caught Kane's eyes briefly across the room. He nodded once. She returned it. Professional, firm, forgiving without erasing. At 3:30, Harold Pierce visited the ED floor. He didn't make a speech, just walked among his people, shaking hands, listening. Someone murmured, Director's different lately. Another replied, Maybe we all are. He stopped by Grace's station. How's the policy? Alive, she said. We named it. Good. He hesitated. Your mother would have liked this one. Grace smiled. Because it's organized? Because it's kind, he said. They stood a moment, father and daughter cloaked in professional calm, pride showing only in quiet eyes. That evening, the rain finally stopped. Sunlight broke through, spilling gold across the lobby floor. Grace and Evelyn sat on a bench by the window, finishing chart audits. You ever think a single moment could fix a system? Evelyn asked. No, Grace said. But a single moment can start one. She pulled the cracked badge from her pocket, ran her thumb along the fracture. I'll keep this one, Evelyn nodded. Reminds you what happens when the system forgets? Grace looked out at the clearing sky. And what happens when it remembers? From the hallway, a soft voice called, Shift change in 5. Grace rose. Let's give them a better shift to walk into. Evelyn grinned. After you, Nurse Miller. They walked back into the hum, the living heartbeat of the place that had tested them and, in its way, been healed by them too. And somewhere behind the nurses' station, Norman lined up his paper boats, courage, truth, policy, change. 4 little sails catching fluorescent light, steady as the tide. Part 8. Resolution. Tomorrow arrives on time. 1,010 words. The first day under the new protocol began with the sound Seattle knows best. Rain on glass, patient but steady. In the ED, the morning lights came up like sunrise on a stage. The whiteboard glowed with clean lines. Assignments, room numbers, a small printed card pinned in the corner. Red blue stop. Grace arrived early. She placed her lunch in the fridge beside a labeled container of pudding, then stood at the sink and let cool water run over her hands. The water steadied her breathing. The building hummed its low, faithful note. Evelyn stepped in with a clipboard. Draft went out at 11:59 p.m., she said, a hint of pride. Half the attendings signed before midnight. Insomniacs with conscience, Grace said. Evelyn lifted an eyebrow. Or conscience with insomnia. They smiled. The door swung and Dr. Chloe Ung stepped in, hair pulled back, eyes clearer than yesterday. Morning. Huddle in 5? Let's make it 4, Evelyn answered. I like being early for once. They gathered at the station. The team ringed up. Techs, residents, a social worker. Norman in his volunteer vest, his sticker boats neatly lined like punctuation marks. Grace raised her eyes. Red stop means full pause. Blue stop means isolation breach. No debate in the moment. Clarify after, heads nodded. Simple was strong, the intercom chimed. Ambulance inbound, chest pain, male 60s. The room shifted into motion. Carlos prepped to bay. Dr. Ung checked her gloves. Grace rolled a cart to the door, calm in every step. The stretcher burst through, wet tires squeaking on tile. The patient wheezed, hand on sternum. Grace glanced at the monitor. Numbers that weren't yet a story. She started the IV, quick and careful, and looked up just as a second paramedic pushed a coughing teenager in behind them. Cheeks flushed, hoodie damp from the rain. 2 at once, Evelyn said. You're with Bay 2. Grace, take Bay 1. Both moved. The room orchestrated around them. At Bay 1, a family member, son late 30s, leaned in, whispering in panic. He hates masks. They make him feel like he's drowning. Grace positioned the oxygen cannula. This one's light, she said. We'll take care. I promise. In Bay 2, the teen coughed into his sleeve. The cough sounded wrong, hollow, thin. Dr. Ung called out, possible aerosol alert, as a resident reached for the curtain. The resident's hand hovered over the fabric. I can't find a gown, he muttered, already stepping in. Grace's voice cut across the space, low but firm. Blue stop. The word landed like a magnet on the room. People froze, hands mid-motion, shoes halted. The resident blinked, registering the new phrase. He stepped back, heart in his face. Evelyn's voice followed, calm, specific. Gown station, right of Bay 2. We resume in 10 seconds. Charlotte's policy worked. Not as an idea. As a reflex, the count began in the room's silent math. 3 breaths, then 4, then 5. Gowns appeared. Masks sealed. The boy coughed again, but now behind the proper barrier. The cough becoming data instead of risk. Evelyn nodded. Clear. Proceed. Action restarted, not rushed but exact. Grace returned to Bay 1. The older man's breathing eased under her hands. She set the IV, logged vitals, and met the son's eyes. You did right calling early, she said. He nodded, jaw loosening. I didn't want to be a bother. Your family, she said. You're never a bother. Across the unit, the teen's test panel lit a small flag. Dr. Ung's shoulders dropped in relief. Not the first thing we feared, she called. Still careful. The morning rolled forward. The red-blue stop cards on lanyards flashed as people moved. The policy wasn't a poster anymore. It was breath. Near 10 o'clock, a figure appeared at the station. Dr. Leonard Kane stood in scrubs, coatless, a notepad in hand. He didn't step into the center. He took a place at the edge and listened. Evelyn noticed and tipped her chin to where a small cluster of nurses reviewed notes. Start there, she said. They'll tell you what the policy missed. Kane nodded and moved in. He didn't lead the circle. He didn't talk first. He scribbled quietly as 2 nurses described glove shortages at specific hours, and a tech suggested labeling carts by color to match the stops. He asked one question, what makes it fail at 3 a.m.? And let their answers fill the page. Grace caught his eye once. He looked the way a person looks learning their first new language, humbled by grammar, grateful for verbs. She returned to her charting with a small private nod. At noon, Charlotte Reed came down in flats instead of heels, a clue that she was staying. She didn't hover. She carried a tablet and a folded list. Director wants to join huddle at 2, she told Evelyn. He promises no speeches. He's learning, Evelyn said. Charlotte turned to Grace. How'd it feel when you called Blue Stop? Like the room remembered itself, Grace replied. Good, Charlotte said. We'll need that memory again. They didn't wait long. Near 1:30, a trauma rolled in. Two-car collision, driver conscious but combative from fear. The man swore he was fine, tried to swing his legs off the gurney. A medic gripped the rail. Sir, stay still. He pushed the hand away, fumbling with the cervical collar. I'm leaving, he said, voice climbing toward panic. I don't do hospitals. Grace stepped to the side of the bed, not front, not blocking, just present. Sir, she said, tone level, you're safe here. Your body hit something hard. Let us look before you go. I said I'm fine. Then help us prove it, she said. The man glared at her, then at the ceiling. His breath roughened. He tried again with the collar. Grace glanced at the monitor. Heart rate spiked. An irregular beat flirted at the edges. She nodded to Evelyn, who moved toward the head. Dr. Ung stood ready at the foot, eyes steady. The man sat up too fast. The world tilted for him. His hand shot out. Not a slap, an instinctive grab to steady himself. His fingers closed around Grace's forearm. The room drew a breath. Grace didn't flinch. She kept her voice slow. I've got you, she said. Stay with us. The man blinked, jaw working, then loosened his grip. He exhaled and sank back. Thank you, she said, and placed his hand on the rail. Hold here instead. A minute later, he was stabilized, the collar secured, an EKG printing truths without drama. The resident read it. No big surprises, she said. Lucky day, the man swallowed. Sorry, he muttered. I panicked. We all do, Grace said. That's why we write instructions on days we don't. He gave a weak smile. You're good at this. She is, Evelyn said from the head of the bed. And she's not alone. They moved the gurney with care, wheels finally making peace with tile. The room's heartbeat settled back to routine. At 2, the huddle gathered again. Harold Pierce stood at the back, not behind Grace, not beside her. Present. He listened as a tech reported that the new cart labels saved 30 seconds per isolation check. He made a note when Dr. Ung recommended more gowns stored near Bay 2. When it was Grace's turn, she kept it simple. We called our first blue stop this morning, she said. It worked, we paused. We protected a patient and each other. That's the culture we're building. Applause rose. Not the kind that tries to be a curtain call. The kind that sounds like a room grateful to be itself. After the huddle, Harold approached Kane. They spoke quietly, eyes level. No theater. Kane nodded once, then again, and extended a hand that held no performance. Harold took it. They let go at the same time. Charlotte stood with Grace at the edge of the bustle, the new normal spinning up around them. You wondered yesterday whether the storm was moving toward us or away, Charlotte said. And? Grace asked. It's moving through, Charlotte answered. That's how storms teach. Grace let that sit. She could feel the truth of it in her shoulders, lighter but not careless. Ready without being rigid. Toward evening, the rain let up. Sun edged out, laying a thin bar of gold across the floor. Norman turned his little boats toward it, sails catching light. He'd added a fifth, listen, scrawled in patient script. You've been busy, Grace told him. Retirement is a hobby farm, he said. You grow what you want, she laughed. Evelyn flicked off a desk lamp. Go home on time, she ordered. Culture starts there, too. Grace checked her last chart, confirmed her last discharge, and hung her stethoscope on the same hook she always used. Habit, quietly honored. At the exit, the automatic doors opened their familiar whoosh. She paused at the glass and caught her reflection. The cheek healed, the posture a half-inch taller. Somewhere up on the admin floor, her father's window would be throwing light onto the rain. Somewhere in the education wing, Dr. Kane would be listening to a newer nurse explain why glove sizes matter. Somewhere down this hall, a resident would practice saying, "Blue stop," until the words shaped their mouth without fear. Grace stepped out into the clearing evening. The air smelled washed. The city felt like it had exhaled. Tomorrow had arrived on time. The summer light was softer now, stretching long across the parking lot of Seattle General Hospital. The hydrangeas near the entrance had bloomed, thick blue clusters that made the air smell like rain remembering itself. Grace parked near the staff entrance, the same spot she'd used every shift since the policy launch. Only this time she wasn't reporting for duty. She was walking into the auditorium for the annual staff recognition day. She carried 2 things in her bag, her old cracked badge, and one of Norman's sticker boats. Listen, laminated now, edges sealed against time. Inside, the lobby buzzed with the sound of reunion. Nurses in new scrubs waved to faces they hadn't seen since spring. Residents joked about caffeine debt. Evelyn stood near the auditorium door, clipboard in hand, managing traffic as naturally as breathing. "You're early," she said as Grace approached. "You taught me that habit." Evelyn laughed. "Careful, they'll make you a keynote speaker." "They already did," came a familiar voice. Grace turned. Charlotte Reed was there, sleeves rolled to her elbows, reading from a small note card. "And you're up third right after Director Pierce and the volunteer awards." Grace blinked. "You didn't mention that in rehearsal." Charlotte smiled. "Some stories shouldn't be rehearsed." The auditorium filled slowly, an ocean of blue and white uniforms, a few suits sprinkled like buoys. At the podium, Harold Pierce stood in his quiet confidence, no longer the man who lived in memos, but one who had learned to live in rooms. "Good afternoon," he began. 3 months ago, we learned a hard lesson in the simplest way possible, by listening. And that listening became policy. It's called the Red Blue Stop, and it saved 3 near misses since launch. Applause swelled. Not loud, but deep. Pierce gestured toward Grace. "One of those calls came from a nurse who stood firm when it mattered. Nurse Grace Miller, please join me." Grace walked up, heartbeat steady. When she reached him, he offered his hand instead of a hug. Professional, proud. Their secret handshake now was mutual respect. She turned to the microphone. "I don't like giving speeches," she began, earning a gentle laugh. "But I like safe hospitals, so here we are." She paused. "The Red Blue Stop isn't about hierarchy. It's about hearing. It's the sound a room makes when everyone's dignity counts the same." Charlotte watched from the aisle, arms folded, a smile ghosting her features. Grace lifted the laminated boat from her bag. "This was made by Norman Lewis, one of our volunteers. He called it Listen. It sits on our desk beside Courage, Truth, Policy, and Change. We added one more this month, Trust, because listening isn't the end. It's the start." She set the small boat on the podium. The audience rose, not with cheers, but with a standing silence that meant more. Harold placed a small plaque beside the boat. "For leadership in dignity and change, Nurse Grace Miller." When she sat again, Evelyn squeezed her hand. "You did fine," she whispered. "I didn't faint," Grace said. "That's my definition of fine." After the ceremony, people lingered. Dr. Ung approached, holding a stack of clipboards. "Policy updates for next quarter," she said, almost giddy. "They're naming the new training module after you." The Miller pause. Grace groaned. "That's excessive," and grinned. "Well, it's better than Cane Clause." At that, Dr. Leonard Kane appeared, hearing his name. He carried no clipboard, just a quiet demeanor and a badge clipped to his scrub pocket that read Patient Safety Advisor. "Still following us around, Doctor?" Evelyn teased. "Just making sure the new standards stick," and he replied, then turned to Grace. "I wanted to thank you. The audit committee approved our joint report. It'll be published in the National Journal next month." Grace blinked. "Ours?" "Yours," he corrected gently. "I just helped with grammar," she smiled. "Grammar saves lives too." He nodded once, the gesture of someone who'd found humility and decided to keep it. "See you on rounds," he said, and moved on. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned, Grace stepped outside into the warm twilight. The city was rinsed clean by an afternoon shower. She stood beneath the overhang where months earlier she'd left the building bruised and uncertain. Now she could see the hospital's glass facade reflecting the sunset in sheets of gold. Inside, shift change moved like a heartbeat. Harold joined her quietly, hands in his pockets. "You know, your mother used to say hospitals are like people. They only stay alive if they learn to forgive themselves." Grace looked up at the windows. "Then I think this one's alive again." He smiled. "And you're part of its pulse." They stood in companionable silence. A breeze tugged at the edge of her badge, making it click softly against the lanyard. A sound that once symbolized fear, now just familiarity. "You keeping that old badge?" he asked. "Of course," she said, patting her pocket. "It reminds me where courage begins." He nodded, then pulled out a folded paper. "From Norman," he said. "He wanted you to have this before he moves to California." Grace unfolded it. Inside was a hand-drawn sketch. 5 little paper boats on calm water, the words beneath reading, "When people listen, even paper can float a mountain." Her throat tightened. "I'll frame it. You'll earn another soon enough, Harold said. You always do. As dusk settled, Grace walked down the front steps, the air thick with the scent of wet asphalt and hope. Behind her, the hospital lights glowed like constellations against the city's skin. A bus hissed to a stop across the street. A man in scrubs, new hire judging by the creases, hesitated at the doors. Grace smiled and held them open for him. First shift? She asked. Yeah, he said nervously. Kind of scared, honestly. Good, she said. Means you care. Remember, if something feels wrong, say stop. Someone will stand with you. He nodded, gratitude easing the fear from his shoulders. Thank you, Nurse Miller. Call me Grace, she said. He boarded. The bus pulled away. Grace looked up once more at the hospital sign. Seattle General Hospital, where care means courage, then down at the laminated paper boat in her hand. She set it in a puddle near the curb just to see if it would float. It did. And as it drifted, she whispered to the evening, tomorrow, better. The rain began again, soft and forgiving, washing everything new. End. Thanks for watching.